And Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It is brought to you by the Fanatic Sportsbook at Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City. And, of course, we'll be back there on Monday. The Eagles will have played the Detroit Lions. It is a Sunday night football matchup that you can hear right here on 97.3 ESPN. Andrew DiCecco is in the house for today's Football at 4. And, of course, the Eagles getting ready for a very tough Lions matchup here. This matchup, I've been talking a lot about it this week. I want to get Andrew's take on that. Obviously, a lot happening with this team. We did hear from A.J. Brown throughout the day. He spoke last night. You feel for the guy a little bit here. He just wants this offense to hold up its end of the bargain. And I want to get Andrew's take on why the offense isn't holding up their end of the bargain first before we get to all that stuff. Andrew, you watch this team, and it's perplexing at times. How does a team with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and Saquon Barkley and Jalen Hurts and this offensive line, which is obviously very good, it's not as good as it has been, but how does an offense with all this talent struggle the way we saw them struggle on not only Monday night, but throughout the season? They have so many lulls. So I can kind of feel what A.J. Brown's saying there, that they're not holding up their end of the bargain, and he knows it.
Yeah, well, I know that the consensus would like to point the finger solely at Kevin Patullo, but the reality of the situation, Mike, is that it's a multitude of reasons why the offense hasn't performed to standard. You can look at the offensive line. They haven't been healthy for the better part of the season. And when you're foundationally built to run the football and you can't do that, you're not able to tap into that area of your game. And if you're not throwing the football effectively, all of a sudden that further compounds things. And I would also look at the play calling, the sequencing, the route concepts. And yes, Jalen Hurts at times has not been the player who they need him to be, who he has been at points of his career, at most of his career. There's plays to be made out there. And I think when you hear a lot of players, Jalen Hurts himself, chalk it up as execution as to why they're not fulfilling and meeting and playing to their standards, I think that also has a lot to do with it. So I look at it in the sense of last season, the passing game looked largely similar to what we're seeing right now. The difference is Saquon Barkley in that rushing attack was able to take over games and dictate how defenses played them, and now they don't have that, to this point, to hang their hat on.
Yeah, and, obviously, you look at the run game, it's not the same. What about the passing game, though? Okay, the run game, they're stifling a little bit. They're getting to Saquon. He's not getting the same lanes, maybe the offensive line. But is the passing game, is there more there? Is there more that should be there when you see this passing game kind of emerge and evolve week to week?
Well, there certainly should be when you have that kind of firepower and star power on that side of the ball. But again, I go back to something that I think is kind of overlooked here. This is the way that Nick Sirianni wants to play football from an offensive standpoint. They're conservative. They prioritize ball security more than any team out there. And it's hard to argue with the results, right? They've won at a remarkable clip since the bye week of last season. But where I agree with AJ is that he's trying to get out in front of things here, and a lot of this stuff is getting swept under the rug, and he's trying to put a spotlight on it so that when you get in those high leverage moments, those critical situations, you're able to kind of have that rectified. You're not blind to it. It's not a blind spot. And so philosophically, this is what the Eagles want to be offensively, and that's the way that it's going to be, that conservative, risk-averse style under Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts. That's the way that's what he believes in with conviction, and it's hard to argue the results. Now, I think you can certainly strike that balance, and in a game against the Detroit Lions, they're going to have to get more aggressive and put up points because the Lions are averaging, Mike, 31.4 points a game, and Jared Goff is second in the NFL with 20 touchdown throws. So they're going to move the football, and now the Eagles have to be able to tap into another facet of their offense and really become a little bit more aggressive, in my estimation.
Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4 from the Inside the Birds podcast, InsideTheBirds.com. And AJ stood at his locker last night for about 10 minutes. He says, I don't care if I'm misunderstood. I'll stand up here and I'll fall on the sword if I have to. Do you see a guy who's, troubled by it? Do you feel for the guy as he's standing there? And he seems like he's it almost pains him that this offense is going through what it's going through.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard not to. I mean, he's trying to, if he's willing to have to be the quote unquote bad guy, he's willing to do that if it's for the greater good of the football team. And I think he is largely misunderstood. He doesn't care that he's misunderstood, but there's this sentiment out there that he's infatuated with stats and wants to get his at the expense of the team. That's not the case at all. He prioritizes winning just as much as everybody else in that locker room, but he also knows, Mike, the impact they can have on a football game. On a given play, he can alter momentum. He works hard for those moments. He wants that pressure. He wants the football, and good things happen when A.J. Brown gets the football. And when you're laboring your way down the field and you're someone like A.J. Brown and you know the impact that you can have on a game and you're not getting the football, naturally that's going to conjure frustration. Do I always agree with how he delivers his messaging? Of course not. But it's well taken.
Yeah.
He's right, and they need to be able. They should be listening to AJ and trying to rectify this offense. It's far too talented for it to be the product that we're seeing on a week in, week out basis.
Yeah, and I agree. I don't think he said much wrong this time around. I think he's just saying, hey, look, we're not holding up our end of the bargain. We can't expect the defense to win all these games first. We've got to be better. He was very similar last year where what's wrong? Passing game. And then we saw the passing game kind of get into gear. Hopefully this is what kickstarts this offense. But this is a offense they're going to face in the Detroit Lions that is a different animal, right? They've got – one of the things with Detroit that I like, Andrew, is the cohesion they have. You got Jared Goff. They've got Amon-Ra St. Brown. They've got Jamison Williams. Their offense, they've been together. Now, they do have a new play caller, and now Dan Campbell has taken over the play calling. But this is a very explosive offense. Should be an interesting matchup. What did you like about the Philly defense against Green Bay last week that you think will match up against this Detroit high-powered offense that scored 44 last week?
Well, they were extremely physical. And I think from a pass rushing standpoint, things started to click. And I don't think that was any mistake when you add someone like Jalen Phillips to the mix. When you get back Nolan Smith from injured reserve, they play with toughness and physicality. Nakobe Dean attacking downhill and setting the tone there in run support, picked up his first strip sack of his career. They're just playing, all three levels are complementing each other. And I think now what you're seeing is when they're able to get home, and Vic Fangio doesn't have to blitz. I think they blitzed at 9.5%, which is extremely low considering what they've had to do this season. When you're able to get home with traditional pressure, that alleviates a lot of the burden from the back end. And you didn't hear Adoree Jackson's name called all that much, and I think that was a direct byproduct of what a pass rush can do and how it can help all three levels. And you also saw Jalen Carter and Moro Jomo get involved a little bit more than they have. And when you have other players you have to account for, that opens things up for everybody. And all of a sudden, that cornerback 2 spot that was often discussed this season, and rightfully so, isn't as much under the microscope as it has been.
You look at the impact, Andrew DiCecco's with us here, a little football at 4, the impact of Jalen Phillips. What did you notice right off the bat that he added?
Physicality in the run game. And that's something that I sort of mentioned when they acquired him. He's a two-way player. He can affect the run, and he can certainly get after the passer, but brings a lot of energy. Set the edge with authority. Played 53 snaps in that game, Mike. That was 78% of the Eagles' defensive total that game, and he just plays with his hair on fire, and he flows to the football with urgency. And that he kind of fit in seamlessly with the players that they already have, because that same mindset is adopted across the board from everybody on that defense, and it's something that they pride themselves on. And I think he is really another, when you look at that defense, I mentioned Nakobe Dean. Well, Jalen Phillips is another one of those tone setters that teams are going to have to reckon with.
Yeah, and obviously he was a big factor in the game, got the game ball after the game. He adds something there. I don't know about you, but did it add to what Jalix Hunt brings to the table? And then you saw a sack from Nolan Smith, who probably will see his snap count go up a little bit.
Yeah, and I know we live in a world of stats, and sometimes everyone wants to look at sacks as a metric and maybe equate that to how productive a player is being. But honestly, I think Jalix Hunt's had a solid season, and now he's getting the stats to start to reflect that. Sacks in back-to-back games. He flies around, brings a lot of juice. He's a solid run defender as well, setting the edge with authority. And now he's probably slotted into a role in which he's probably more ideally suited as that third edge rusher. And every player is now going to benefit from not having to take on the lion's share of the snaps, and it's going to help for preservation purposes, but it's also going to help the defense where you're able to send waves, and they have players who can do different things. Brandon Graham, really good in run support. Jalen Phillips, he's rangy, he has really long arms, and he's able to defeat tackles with regularity. Jalen Hunt had a lot more energy, and you're able to see what he can do in his role, and Nolan Smith eventually is going to continue to see his snaps ramp up, I would imagine, and he's their second best edge rusher. So now you're keeping everybody fresh, and they're all bringing something different to the table. And I just wanted to highlight Jalen Hunt there because I think there's a misconception out there that he hasn't necessarily lived up to standards, because if you go back and you watch the tape, there's a lot more beyond the sack total that he's doing, and it's no mistake that Vic Fangio has remained bullish on Jalen Hunt and his development.
Yeah, and I want to get your take on this matchup too, because I kind of look at this as a very interesting spot in the season, Andrew, in that a couple of years ago they're 10-1. Very similar, where they had a lot of big wins. They beat Kansas City on the road. They had beaten Buffalo that year. They won against Dallas, so a good Dallas team. They had some big wins, and you're like, look, they're finding ways to win. They just keep finding ways to win. And then they played San Francisco, and they got the doors beat off them, and then the season fell apart. This feels like a moment right here. This Lions team feels very similar to that San Fran team, where they felt that they actually were the better team last year if those injuries didn't cripple them. They wanted to open the season against Philly this year to show them. So if the Lions come in here and win this game, should we be concerned about the big picture?
Yeah, and it always bugged me when you hear a lot of folks after the game, whether it's on social media or whatever, or talk radio, and they say, yeah, but they're winning the game, so it shouldn't, nothing to see here, it doesn't matter. Well, what A.J. Brown's trying to get across, and I believe his point's well taken, is you can't win that way sustainably in the NFL. And I understand the Eagles have a track record to support that, and it's hard to argue against it, but as Jalen Hurts will tell you, it doesn't get you until it gets you. And he's trying to get out in front of things before it burns them in an inopportune spot down the line. And so you look at this Lions game, Mike, and you equated it to the 2023 game against the 49ers. I don't see it that way, because this defense is head and shoulders above that defense. They are starting to hit their stride. So they're never going to just allow a team to dictate what they want to do. And they have the physicality and the toughness. They're not going to get shoved around. Offensively, you've seen glimpses and spurts. They haven't been consistent. They haven't played 4 quarters of Eagles football and played to that standard that they set for themselves. But because they have that kind of talent, especially on the defensive side, where it was largely absent in 2023, they're an older defense. You're relying on players like Shaq Leonard, Nicholas Morrow, Bradley Roby, and so it's nothing like that. It pales. This team is head and shoulders above it. So
definitely
I don't
better
think it's
defense
that way. But it is a measuring stick game for sure. And I kind of look at it like the Baltimore Ravens game of last season, where you look back on it, and that was the turning point where they went into Baltimore, where everyone was saying that the Baltimore Ravens are a physical team. It's cold. Are the Eagles going to be able to match their physicality? Well, the Ravens had to match the Eagles' physicality in that game, and I think they used that as a launching pad towards that backstretch of the season.
Yeah, I would just add that that defense, you're right, was nowhere near as good as this defense. They had coordinator changes. What I will say is you can't expect the defense to give up 7 points every single week and win games. That's where I think AJ's right. The defense is giving up 7. We can win 10-7, but if the defense gives up 17, it's a stretch to think, can we score 21 right now? That's what his messaging kind of is, and I think that's fair to ask. You can't ask, especially Detroit, Dallas, Chicago. They've got some good offenses the next 3 matchups that they're facing here. What is something about the Detroit offense that would worry you in this matchup?
Yeah, and by the way, I agree with you. You can't expect the defense and special teams to keep picking up the tab, especially when you look at the money that's invested in this offense that's supposed to be high octane. They have to be able to play complementary football and alleviate some of that pressure because, as you mentioned, it's not realistic or feasible for the defense to be able to continuously hold teams to 7, 10, 17 points. Eventually the offense has to answer the bell here, but the Lions, from an offensive standpoint, have a lot of players who I like. David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, that two-headed rushing attack. Now, Jahmyr Gibbs, he's one of my favorite players to watch in the NFL. If you remember before the draft, Mike, I actually was on with you, and I had him rated even higher than Bijan Robinson. And
I remember that.
I just think his ability to catch the football, 32 catches, he's dynamic in space, so tackling in the open field becomes even more paramount this game. But they also have Laporta. Laporta has their tight end, 49 targets this season, second on the Lions, and he's that intermediary threat and safety valve for Jared Goff. Jamison Williams is averaging 17.6 yards per reception, and he's the X factor for me because if he is able to capitalize on any kind of dysfunction in the back end or miscommunication, he's proven that he can get behind the secondary. Then you have Amon-Ra St. Brown, who thrives in short to intermediate levels of the field, good short area quickness, tough to bring down after the catch. So this is a team that has a wealth of weapons, and the Eagles are going to have to really be on their A game and make sure that they're not allowing any kind of lapses and mental lapses or not bringing down players in the open field, which has been an issue earlier in the season. But Jared Goff, by the way, 20 touchdowns passing on the season. That's second in the NFL. And his passing yardage, 2,235 yards, I believe, is ninth in the NFL. So they're going to be able to put up points. The Eagles have to make sure that they're answering the bell on their end offensively and trying to keep pace.
Offensively, we've been talking about the struggles. Where can Detroit's defense, where are they a little light?
At the corners. Yeah. I think you look at Terry
big
Arnold,
week for AJ, right? Big week for AJ?
It should be. And I think that in a game like this, Mike, it behooves the Eagles to get their top passing option involved early if you want to have a chance to put up some points against this team. But I look at Terry Arnold, their corner, and he was often compared to Quinyon Mitchell in that draft. And I like Quinyon Mitchell for a number of reasons. I preferred him over Arnold, but Arnold has some deficiencies in coverage. I like Brian Branch. I like their safeties. But I think if you look at the cornerback spot is where I think that they're a little light. Linebacker, Jack Campbell was another player who a lot of folks laughed at when the Lions took an off-ball linebacker in the first round. He's been a solid player, but this is a matchup where I think the Eagles should be able to get things going in the passing game. Now, my understanding, at least on Thursday, is that the wind is going to be a big factor, so you could conceivably see a run-heavy approach in this game. But I think that if the Eagles were to exploit the Lions in any one area, it would be on the corners.
All right, there you go. A little look at the Lions and the Eagles Sunday Night Football right here on 97.3 ESPN. The pregame coverage starts at 7. Merrill Reese, Mike Quick on the call, 8:15 on Sunday night. Big one, Eagles-Lions. Lions looking to show the world that, hey, don't forget about us, too. Everybody seemed to be talking about Green Bay and everybody else. Seattle's starting to get a little bit, the Rams. But this Lions team is pretty darn good. We'll get a look at them on Sunday Night Football. He's Andrew DiCecco. This has been Football at 4. Thanks, man.
Thanks, Mike. Take care.